It is 8:05, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. All right, so I'm just going to look at some of the questions that have been asked, and then I will get rolling in about 10 seconds. You can do a countdown if you like, but it's not necessary. There we go. Alrighty, so hello. I hope everyone's having a great week, and welcome to this week's Hangout. I was kind of worried. It seemed like there weren't going to be any questions submitted, but it seems like everyone was submitting them as the day went on. So I ended up with a bunch of things to talk about and no questions, and I ended up taking out things to talk about and a bunch of questions. So that works for me. So I wanted to bring up first, before I get into the questions, that at this point, everyone has had some non-skill victories. And I'd like to remind everyone to keep practicing the habit of reflecting on them as you have them. I'd recommend that you not only reflect on them, but record them as part of your personal progress tracking. So we've often talked about how the scale is not representative of your actual progress that's happening. And then in most or many cases, the scale really lags behind what's going on. But in all honesty, the physical changes that are happening are really not as important as the mental and emotional changes that are happening. So in many ways, these non-physical changes are what allow the physical ones to happen. So I believe it's of vital importance that you keep track of them, realize that they've happened, and that them happening is progress, and it's more important progress than what you actually see on the scale. These non-physical changes, the mental and emotional changes, are the foundation that is needed for the physical changes to become permanent. If you don't have that foundation and you just lose a bunch of weight, and there's not that foundation there, it's likely that you'll rebound that weight. Hope you don't, but if you don't have that foundation, it's going to be much more difficult than if you did. So I just wanted to mention that out of the way. Those of you in EFL Continued, it may be a good time for you to revisit and add to your list of non-scale victories. And those of you that are just having gotten the assignment this past weekend, if you haven't completed it, it's a great opportunity to do so. And it's one of those things where you should continue to keep track of your non-scale victories as they happen. Each one is important. It's not just a one-time thing. I had a non-scale victory. Every single time you have one, consider it a personal record and continue to keep track of them. And when you need a reminder of why you're doing this, or you need a reminder of how far you've come, the non-scale victories, the progress you've achieved mentally and emotionally, those will be helpful to look back and say, look how far I've come. This is how I used to think. This is how I used to feel. For example, I felt guilty when I ate birthday cake. That may have been you a long time ago, and you may either now or at some point in the future be at the point where you can eat birthday cake and realize birthday cake is carbs, fat, protein. It's just food, and I can eat it and not feel guilty. So that change in mentality and emotional state, that's huge. And like I said, that I feel that that's more important than any progress you see in the numbers that you see on your scale. So please keep that in mind. So as I mentioned, there are a bunch of questions, so I'm going to dive right in. So Sem had asked about intermittent fasting and my thoughts on it. So I've talked about it previously, that I do think intermittent fasting as a long-term habit, like I'm going to do this the rest of my life, is certainly not for everyone. I personally have done intermittent fasting for a few years, basically in the middle of my weight loss and maintenance period. But I transitioned off of it, and there's a couple reasons for that. The primary one being that I found myself experiencing an unconquerable hunger. Nothing would fill me up anymore. I started to expect 2,000 calorie meals as the norm. So anytime I had a smaller meal, which 1,000 calorie meal for most people is pretty big and pretty filling, nothing would fill me up. I was starting to be able to eat large amounts of fiber, so much so that a 2,000 calorie meal and 80 grams of fiber eaten in an 8-hour window, it just didn't play well with my digestive system. So I have gotten off of intermittent fasting as a everyday thing. I do think it's fine if any of you want to try it and see if it works for you. But I will caution you, there is an adaptation period. For maybe a week or two, you might feel awful not having breakfast if you're used to it. But after that adaptation period, you'll find that you're able to use it as frequently or infrequently as you like, where you can kind of slip in and out of it. Even though I don't normally recommend it anymore, I do recommend that everyone use it if possible, if you're able to adapt to it, as a tool for certain situations where you have a social event planned and you want to just essentially have extra calories. You can skip breakfast, eat a protein-filled lunch, and then you have tons of calories left that are likely all carbs and fat for whatever your social event is or special occasion. That's an easy strategy. I use it all the time. I used it on Halloween to great effect, where I was didn't have any breakfast, had all chicken breast and salad for lunch, and then I had pizza and beer and Halloween candy. Still hit my goals, and I just moved right on without any guilt. So in that particular case, it's a very effective tool. As far as a long-term habit, it's going to vary person to person, but there's no harm in trying. So you just, unless you have problems, medical problems with blood sugar. So that's maybe something you want to look into. If you have specific health problems, you probably want to talk to your doctor about them. So, in that case, you don't want to mess around. All right. The next question is from Danny, and it's about excess or loose skin, specifically how to reduce the chance of having it or minimize it as people lose weight. So this is a tough one. Loose skin is a personal issue in that it doesn't affect every person in the same way, and some people it doesn't affect at all. Some people may not ever have to worry about it. Some people will. I have some myself. I know plenty of people that have lost less weight than I have, but have far worse skin issues. So I do think how fast you gained the weight in the first place is a factor. And in my particular case, I'd essentially gained 100 pounds in about 2 years or so. I was always overweight, a fat kid growing up. I got married in, I'm going to say 2003, and I was probably around 300 pounds or so then. By 2005, I was over 400 pounds. So that 100 pounds came quickly. The first 300 pounds or 290 pounds or so took about 23 years slowly. So the 100 pounds is probably what caused my issues in that regard. I can't say for sure, but that's what I consider to be likely. So like I said, I do have some. It's not as bad as other people that have lost far less than I. So what I attribute to my own minimization would be losing weight slowly. It took me a couple years to get through all 200 pounds that I had to lose. And the primary reason for that is the elasticity of your skin does take a long time for it to change. It's not just going to bounce back. In addition to that, nutrition, proper hydration, and just normal skincare. Some type of lotion or something like that applied to your skin may help you. There's nothing specific I could recommend. Just anything that helps exfoliate your skin and keep it healthy. If that's something that concerns you and you have specific areas you think may be more prone, that just may be areas you want to pay a little bit more attention to. I know for myself, it's like under the arms and under the belly button, and that's maybe on the back of the legs. And like I said, if you think you have areas that you think might be the problem, you just may want to pay a little bit more attention to them as far as skincare goes. So for nutrition and proper hydration, just make sure you drink enough water to satiate your thirst, and that you're eating enough vitamin and mineral rich food. As you know, in extreme fat loss, I don't recommend specific food choices because I would ask that everyone make food choices they can live with. Part of that, though, is you do want to make sure you are getting enough vitamins and minerals for health. So that's the other part of the equation. That's why I say in your program documents, make sure that you are getting lean meats and or if you're eating meat, eat meats that are lean and get in fruits and vegetables to be able to hit all of your vitamin and mineral goals. The other factor, I think, is some form of resistance training. A form of weightlifting. It doesn't have to be specifically barbell weightlifting, but some form of progressive resistance, be it with dumbbells or exercise bands, something like that, that is basically telling your body that as weight is lost off of your body to preserve the muscle mass that you have. And in some cases, if you're just starting, you can actually build more muscle as you go along. And I think that is one of the key factors, is to have some form of that if possible. Some people may have health issues that prevent that, but in those cases, we're not going for that fast of weight loss anyways. So the combination of slower weight loss and weightlifting, if you can, should minimize it as much as you possibly can. I don't think that if you're in a situation where you're likely to get it, those combination of things are going to get rid of it entirely, but it will minimize it, I believe. So like I said, many of the people that I've talked to that have had really bad skin issues, it was from their stories, it seemed to be a combination of losing weight incredibly quickly, likely with a fad diet, and not doing any form of resistance training to ensure that they weren't losing muscle. So probably a good portion of the weight they lost was their muscle mass, which was holding their skin up. The muscle mass goes away, and so does the fat, and the skin sags and doesn't, bounce back. So those are some things to keep in mind. Another thing is, I know I mentioned that how fast you gain the weight and how much you gain initially can have a factor. I do think that the more weight you have to lose, the more this might be an issue for you. So there are some of us that would but want to essentially lose half of our starting body weight. You are more likely to see an issue versus someone that has less than 100 pounds to lose. So that's, this plays back into the fact that it's very individualized. So it's going to affect different people differently. All right. The next question comes from Patrick, who had just turned in his PhD dissertation. I know I said it in the Toxic group, but that's awesome, Patrick. I really think it's awesome of you to want to be able to make some changes in your life while you're going through a PhD, writing the dissertation, and then defending it. So that's awesome. You're a brave man, and then like I said, I wish I could give you more than a prop, but like an actual high five, because that's awesome. So Patrick has done the best he can with his primary focus being his dissertation, but he's asking, what does he do when he falls off the horse? How do you get back into the mindset of wanting to have achievements? And he seems to be stuck in neutral. So I think this is a good question, because this is something that happens to everyone. Everyone's circumstances are going to be, different, and it's going to happen for different reasons. But the way that everyone can deal with it can kind of be boiled down to a few things. Dick Talens recently wrote an article about this, and I think he covered the subject rather well. But I'm basically going to paraphrase his article, and I'll add a few things. After I have to say what I have to say about it, if you'd like to read the article, you can look on his website or ask for the link in group, and I'll post it. So there are 5 steps. I'm not going to say they're easy, but going through them should help you get back on the horse without feeling like you're behind. And that's one thing I want to emphasize is if you are struggling and life gets in the way, please don't feel like that you're behind or you need to catch up. This is not a race. While we are based on a group format, your journey and not quickly, but what pace you set for yourself is your own pace. There's no need to catch up with the group. Every single person, even if they to you appear to be working at the same pace, they're going to have their own trials and tribulations, and they require a different amount of things to get through. So please don't ever feel like you're behind or you have to catch up, because it's whatever pace you can handle that will make this a process happening in the background is the pace you need to be working at, because it should not feel like something that's stressful that you have to commit all of your mental energy and resources to, or you're not going to stick with it and it's not going to be permanent. So please keep that in mind. All right. So step 1 is realize that falling off the horse and not feeling motivated to get back on it is normal. Everyone does it. It's not a negative thing. You didn't do anything wrong or bad. It's just that life happens. And sometimes fitness and your dietary choices, those are the first things to go out the window. And, sometimes that's necessary. It's the first thing you need to remove in order for you to get through whatever you have going on. I know for a while I said that I was right there with you, trying to lose the last couple pounds that I had to go. I started my semester a couple weeks ago, and the first thing I did was I upped my calories to be around maintenance, and I scaled back my exercise to 2 days a week. It's really the last thing that I'm focused on right now, because it's not more important than the other things I have going on. So I just kind of put it on the back burner. I still pay attention to it, but I don't really devote any significant energy for it. The bare minimum amount of energy I also have a coach for that. So that's someone else's problem right now, even though it's about me. out of sight, out of mind right now. So when that happens, it's important that you not beat yourself up over it. It's going to happen. You just need to forgive yourself, realize that what matters in regard to this context is what happens next, what you do next. So that's where you are now. You can realize that it's normal and you're ready to move on without beating yourself up and feeling guilty. So step 2 would be something that we talk about often, is that when you have a misstep, it's important that you dedicate yourself to learn from any mistakes or missteps or challenges rather than judging yourself over them. I believe it was Bruce Lee that said that mistakes are the great educator. And the only true mistake is if you don't learn from your other mistakes. So if you're not learning from any time you feel you've made a mistake or a misstep, then you're missing out. The one key thing you need to be objective about is this. And fortunately, that's where I can help you. Is I've said this before, is that often when it comes to fitness and nutrition and exercise, humans, all of us, we're not good at being objective about things like this. So that's why it helps to have someone else kind of looking at our progress, our numbers, how we're doing, and providing us some perspective. That it's really hard to reflect in on ourselves all the time and provide that for ourselves. So when you do that, it's unlikely that you've regressed entirely and that you've thrown your progress out the window. That's probably unlikely. So I can help you kind of reflect back, and we can look at specifics regarding individual situations and kind of see where your starting off point is. So step 3 is something we've just talked about, is the non-scale victories. So take a step back, look at your non-scale victories, and be proud of how far you've come and all of your victories, scale and non-scale included, and be thankful that you were able to do that, and be proud of yourself. That'll kind of set you into the right attitude of realizing that you already know what to do. You already had success at it. You simply chose to do something else in the meantime, and now you're coming back to it because it does matter to you, and that's it. Step 4 is, this is my favorite because I love to do this, is to make a to-do list. I have to-do lists all over the place, on my fridge, on my bulletin board, in my work email, my personal email, my school email. I just have to-do lists everywhere, and it keeps me organized. Without it, I would be forget for what exactly your plan is going to be for getting back on the horse. Do your best to achieve everything you put on it. You don't have to focus on how well you do. Just do your best to get through the list. And this will give you some momentum getting out of neutral. So even if you have 50, don't put 50 things on your list, but even if you had 50 things on your list, do your best to do at least one of them as good as you can. So what this does is this gives us a baseline. So your first week back on the horse, you've completed one item, however many items off that list. So for step 5, you look back at the week that you just did with your to-do list, and then you try to do better. Be it, I'm going to hit my calorie and protein goals a little bit better. So every week you can look to improve upon the last one as good as you can. And you've created a positive feedback loop. You have momentum, you have something to aim for, and those goals are something just beyond the scale or the measurements. Eventually, you won't need to do that anymore, and you'll have that feedback loop going, and you'll already be back on the horse without noticing it. So I think that those 5 steps will kind of get you from feeling like I'm in neutral, I don't know what to do, to a way to stress about it and move forward and keep moving forward. So kind of playing into the similar theme of I just got back from something, don't know what to do, is from Melissa, who had just been traveling, and she was asking, do you have any advice in terms of eating while traveling, such as long airport waits and flights, unfamiliar cities, etc.? So this is a little bit different rather than what do I do after. This is what could I have done differently or better during or before. So I'm glad you asked this. I do tend to travel pretty often during the Highland Games season, which is spring, summer, and fall. So I have a couple things that I do when I know I have a trip coming up. My wife competes in the Highland Games more than I do, but we always travel together since I'm usually watching the kids. And it usually involves traveling to cities that are not big tourist destinations or large cities. So, places like out in rural Ohio, the mountains of West Virginia, or, places outside of DC in the woods, stuff like that. So it's not always places where you can count on having certain chains of restaurants and grocery stores that are carried all kind of food items you're used to. So usually when I'm planning a trip, what I'll do is the primary important thing to do is to plan ahead. There are things like Yelp. I use something called TV Food Maps, which basically maps out all of the restaurants that various TV show hosts on like Food Network. What's the other one? Doesn't matter. Like Man vs. Food, Andrew Zimmern, all those types of foodie shows. So I'll look for some different food options of places that are considered popular. And the more popular restaurants would likely tend to be places that are not chains and would have more like home style cooking that's closer to what you'd kind of find in a home cooked meal. So that's kind of where I start from. And then I kind of work backwards from there. I would normally bring some protein bars with me to get some extra protein and fiber in, but it's not something that I do every single time. If I'm looking for quick meals that are fast food options, I would look for something like Chipotle or Qdoba, where I can easily find a meal that order it as is, that it fits my goals for the day. So like Chipotle, I would get a burrito bowl with double meat, skip the rice, add in guacamole, cheese, and sour cream. And you could get that to be around 800 calories or less without the double meat, or if you skip the guacamole or sour cream or something. And it is very good. Outside of that, most fast food places have menus. You can kind of see what fast food places would be around where you're going to be that have menus that can work in your favor as long as you try to figure out some options in advance. So that's the key here, is that planning is kind of required. Unfortunately, if you're standing in line at a fast food place and you're already hungry, or you're in a drive-through, you're not really going to be able to make good decisions in the moment. It's the same thing as grocery shopping when you're hungry. If you go grocery shopping when you're hungry and you have a list of 12 things, you're probably going to come out of the grocery store with 30 things or 29 things and one thing you ate while you were shopping. So it's the same thing that applies here, is the more planning you do, the more prepared you are in advance, the less you have to rely on willpower. Willpower is fickle. It's not something you'd want to hang your hat on because it's going to fall. So the more planning you do, the better off you'll be. Some other things you can do is, since we already talked about intermittent fasting, you can skip a meal here or there. Or if you're just looking for something that you're really hungry and you don't want to skip, is grab a piece of fruit, like an apple or a banana, something like that. Since you mentioned airports, Melissa, that's every airport I've been in recently in the past couple of years. There's always like a newsstand that has some fresh fruit in it. You could even get some mixed nuts. I don't normally recommend mixed nuts because they can be calorically dense, but if you're buying them in an airport, you're going to have like a pre-portioned bag for you, and it's not like buying a bag of almonds at Sam's Club or Costco that's like this big, because that's real easy to overeat on those. But if you're in an airport, you could buy like peanuts or something like that, and it comes in a little tiny bag and is pre-portioned for you. That might help. And that can help you kind of avoid some of the fast food calorie bombs that you didn't prepare for. So I know, like I was just on a trip in October. I had a 6 a.m. flight. I was up at 4 a.m., landed at my destination at 9:30, got my rental car, drove somewhere, did some sightseeing. I didn't end up eating till around noon. But that was what I planned to do, so I didn't feel like I was missing out, even though I'd been awake for 8 hours at that point already. So I had already planned on it. I had plenty of coffee to keep me going, and I didn't feel deprived at all. But like I said, doing some research in advance is the primary thing that helps, as well as having some easy ways to get rid of hunger, like a fruit or protein bar. And regardless of where you are, there's likely some place that has some convenience items like that. And when it comes to fast food, there are ways to kind of configure meals that will fit in a little bit better, or at least make you less hungry. So like outside of Chipotle and the ones I mentioned, an example would be McDonald's. I'd probably grab like a chicken sandwich or a burger, maybe ditch the buns, not get fries, get a side salad, or if it was like a Wendy's, get 2 burgers, combine them with 1 bun, and get like chili or something. So that way I'm kind of like upping the protein content I'm not depriving myself of by just eating like a salad or something, so it still tastes good, but you're just kind of cutting out some of the things that would not help you with your goals and adding in a couple more of the ones that would. So those are a couple ideas. I think that's a good starting point for that topic. It's one of those topics that's real easy to speak in generalities. But if you do some research, you may find some specific places that you may need some assistance with. And I find that's a great discussion for the group. So next time someone has a trip coming up, if you post like, hey, I'm going to this city, post it in groups, say, what are some good fast food places I should go? What are some sit down restaurants I could go? Things like that. I'm sure other people would love to help out. I'd love to help out because I travel enough that I would love to pull up a city I've never been to, look on Yelp, browse around through some of the reviews, and kind of make some choices from there. So, please, if you're traveling and want some suggestions, that's a great thing to try. So I think that covers all of the submitted questions I have. I have the Q&A turned on. I don't see any submitted. I'm going to flip back over to Photocracy groups and see if anyone's posted anything else. And let me see if anyone else is showing in the control room. No. All right, I need to get that figured out so that you guys can talk on Hangout on Air afterwards. So if anyone knows anything about that, I'd be more than happy to find out the details on that one. But I'm going to make sure the Q&A is turned on. So please ask a question if you have one. And I'm just going to check through the groups real quick. All right, I'm just going to check one more thing here. Okay, I don't see any posted. I'm just going to give it one more moment in case anyone has another question, and we'll just go from there. Like I said, I'm trying to figure out how to do the Hangout on Air so it auto posts to my YouTube channel so that people that aren't able to attend, because I know we have people across various time zones, I think, wide coverage here, but also be able to participate by talking instead of just trying to type stuff into a Q&A app. So. All right, well, people are dropping off, it looks like. So we'll end it there. Thank you, everyone, for attending if you attended, and thank you, everyone, for listening if you're listening. As always, if you have any questions that you thought of after the Hangout, or if you'd like to discuss something I talked about now in more detail, we can do that on the groups. And I will talk to everyone next week. I hope you guys have a great week. I don't know about you, but I'm in Pittsburgh, and it's supposed to go from 60 degrees to 30 degrees overnight, so I'm not looking forward to that, but I'm sure I'll manage. So everyone have a great night, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.